Good evening, everyone. Welcome to, I don't know if this is day 7 or day 8 of our conditional use hearings for the Mountain Trail Solar application for conditional use. The first thing I want to do for the record is identify a document that's been marked as Board Exhibit number 27. Board Exhibit number 27 is a conflict of interest abstention memorandum signed by Supervisor Davis, recusing himself from the proceeding this evening on the motion for recusal. This has been submitted to the Secretary of the Township as well. I'm showing this to Council so that he can see a copy of this. This is related solely to this motion, and the reason stated is that given that the motion, that he is the subject of the motion, it would be inappropriate for him to vote on the subject motion. The first thing that we have to address this evening is the motion for recusal that has been filed by the applicant, and what I intend to do is I have some questions that I would like to ask Mr. Davis on the record. Then I will give council the opportunity to ask any follow-up questions, and then the board will entertain any argument. Is there any objection to this procedure, Mr. Gallagher?
No objection.
Mr. Cluck? You haven't seen this.
That's true. But here's my question. The board isn't going to vote on the motion. The board doesn't decide whether or not to recuse. The supervisor himself makes that decision. I don't think the other two can decide to recuse the third supervisor.
They cannot.
Okay. Then I'm fine.
Yeah. So, did you have a question? Okay. At this time, can we place Mr. Davis under oath?
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth? I do.
No, I don't. No, he's fine. As long as you keep your voice up so everyone can hear you, I think you're fine where you are. Mr. Davis, can you state your current position with the Township of Windsor?
Currently, I'm the Township Supervisor.
Is everyone able to hear him? No. If you want, you'll have to go up. So I'll ask you the question again. Can you state your current position with the Township of Windsor?
Township Supervisor.
Okay. And are you also the Vice Chair of the Board of Supervisors?
I am. Yes.
And when did your term begin?
January 2nd of 2024.
Okay. And prior to taking office, did you swear an oath?
I did.
And are you familiar with what that oath indicated?
Yes, that oath is essentially, I'm supposed to uphold the laws of the state, the Constitution, and enact the ordinance that's on the books.
Okay. And is it your intention to fulfill your oath?
Yes, it is.
And do you understand that in the proceeding, this conditional use proceeding, that you're sitting in an adjudicatory rather than a legislative role?
I understand that.
And can you describe in your own words what your role is in this proceeding?
My role is to consider the application presented in front of me, the conditional use application in this case, from the applicant, and to ensure the applicant is following the rules that are in the guidelines laid in the ordinance.
And are you familiar with being at a variance hearing before the Township Zoning Hearing Board on February 16th of 2022?
Yes.
And Did you make any comments regarding the applicant or the applicant's proposed project?
I did.
Okay. And did you express an opinion as to whether the applicant could or could not fulfill its requirements on the ordinance for conditional use approval?
Can you ask that question again?
Sure. Did you express any opinion as to whether or not the applicant could or could not fulfill the requirements for conditional use approval?
I don't recall my exact words, but I did question some of the actions they were seeking on that piece of property at the time.
Okay. And that was prior to being seated as a supervisor?
It was 2 years ago.
Prior to running for supervisor?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And do you tend to listen to all the evidence that's presented at this hearing carefully?
Yes, that's my obligation.
Do you believe that you can fairly apply the relevant ordinance and the relevant law to the facts to reach a conclusion supported by the law in this proceeding?
Yes, that's what I swore under oath I would do.
And since the time at which you took office, have you expressed an opinion as to whether the applicant could or could not fulfill the requirements under the ordinance?
I have not said anything to anybody regarding this topic.
And again, you're able to be impartial and fairly and objectively review the application, the evidence presented?
That's my intent.
Okay. Mr. Gallagher, do you have questions?
Thank you. Just a few. So Supervisor Davis, you did appear in opposition to an application of Mountain Trail Solar February 16th, 2022.
As a private citizen, I did, yes.
As a resident. And where's your residence?
Sunday Road.
What's your address?
468.
And is this adjacent to the property?
A part of my property does touch that property, yes.
Okay. And you're aware that this, the appeal of the zoning hearing board's denial of this application is pending in court right now?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay. You reviewed what has been identified as Exhibit 45, which is a memorandum of law regarding recusal of supervisors.
I reviewed it. I'm not a legal expert to make a judgment on that.
I just want to refer to what is Exhibit A.
I know what it is.
Can you identify what it is?
It's a postcard that was mailed at my expense for the primary in May of 23.
Okay. And can you describe the pictures that are on your postcard?
The pictures?
Yes.
On the front cover of that postcard is a picture of myself. And do you want me to read the postcard?
No.
Okay. You just want the pictures?
Yes.
Then there's a picture of a field and there's a picture of solar panels.
And are the solar panel, where is this picture of the solar panels from? Where did you get this photo?
I pulled it offline.
Okay. And it's a damaged, this is a damaged solar facility?
That's what it appears to me, yes.
Okay. So did you run on a platform that dealt with solar, the regulation of solar?
Well, Mr. Gallagher, if you look at the on the front cover of that, I ran on a platform preserving open space is what I ran under.
Okay.
It doesn't say anything about the applicant on that postcard.
No, it does not say anything about the applicant, but there is a picture of a solar panels that are damaged with a big red X on it.
Okay.
Okay. At the beginning of the outset of this conditional use hearing, sorry, let me take a step back. Who resides with you at your home? On Sunday Road.
Who resides with me? My
Do
family
you live
does.
by yourself?
My family does.
Okay. And who is that? How many family members do you have that reside in your house?
What's the relevance, Mr. Gallagher,
Well, there at the end of it was a very short hearing, but there was a board exhibit, I believe it was Objectors Exhibit 4, that identified a number of residents that were represented by Mr. Cluck who withdrew their appearance.
Okay. And what's the relevance of that with regard to this witness's testimony?
Well, there is a obligation under existing law that there can't be any bias or the appearance of bias. And I am just asking, I'm just getting clarification for the record of whether or not the family members who reside at his home, who were represented by Objectors Counsel, were in fact family members represented by Objectors Counsel.
Were those individuals who withdrew representation from Mr. Cluck your family members?
Yes.
Have you ever been represented by Mr. Cluck?
No.
Have you ever lodged your appearance as an objector in this matter?
No.
Move on.
Okay. But your members were represented by Mr. Cluck. Members of your family.
I said move on.
You know that. That's what he said, and we're going to move on.
And they withdrew their appearance at the last hearing.
Correct.
Okay.
It was the first opportunity to do that since I became supervisor on January 2nd, 2024.
Understood.
Prior to that, I was a private citizen.
Thank you. Understood. Just making a record. And the further questions?
Mr. Cluck, do you have any questions? You know, Mr. Cluck, before you proceed, I want to ask Mr. Gallagher this question, and I think that it goes to the comment that you made prior, Mr. Cluck, is what is your motion? Is your motion seeking his disqualification, or is your motion asking him to recuse himself?
Asking him to recuse himself.
But as Mr. Cluck has already pointed out, only he can make that decision. So are you asking him to recuse?
Yeah, is what I'm asking.
So you're not asking the board to make any specific action or finding. You're asking for.
We have requested under Pennsylvania law. Sorry. At the outset, I did not know whether or not Supervisor Davis intended to sit and consider this appeal or consider this application. I had reached out to you on what the intention was, and I didn't get an answer, so we provided this memorandum just in case, because we believe under controlling Pennsylvania law that he has a duty to recuse himself because he's sitting in a quasi-judicial capacity and not a legislative capacity.
So you're asking him to make that decision. You're not asking the board to make that decision.
Counsel as well, yes. I mean, that's why we provided a memorandum of law. And the way that it was phrased at the end of the last hearing, you wanted to take this under consideration. So it was my understanding that this would be reviewed by you with Supervisor Davis.
And it has been. My question, my inquiry is exactly what action you're seeking, because I think Mr. Cluck raises a very good point that the only person who can make the recusal decision is Supervisor Davis.
We're requesting that he recuse himself.
Okay. All right, Mr. Cluck, you may proceed.
Supervisor Davis, the Exhibit 46, the excerpt from the zoning hearing board, you were a party in that proceeding?
I was a resident attendee.
And you understand the zoning hearing board wasn't reviewing the application for conditional use similar to what is this proceeding, an application for conditional use. Do you understand the difference?
Yes.
And in fact, this was merely seeking a dimensional variance that would exceed the 20% maximum building coverage amount. And that's what you were opposed to?
I believe that is correct, yes.
Okay, that's the only questions I have.
Okay. At this point, I guess Mr. Davis will entertain argument with regard to your request for recusal.
I believe I've provided, that's the argument that was provided for in our memorandum of law, that there's an appearance of impropriety having appeared in opposition to an application that is currently in litigation right now for the same project, having run on a platform of the solar industry, and having family members who have been represented by opposing counsel, that under controlling law, whether or not there is actual bias, there is certainly an appearance of bias, and that there's a duty acting in a quasi-judicial capacity to recuse himself from this proceeding.
Mr. Cluck.
First, I want to address the memorandum of law. I want to be absolutely clear on the record exactly what is it that this memorandum of law says. The title, Memorandum of Law Regarding Recusal of Supervisors, plural, is, are you seeking the recusal of more than one supervisor?
This question's for me. This is not a personal issue. We provided a memorandum of law. We were unaware of whether or not Supervisor Davis, as I just stated, intended to sit or recuse himself. So it just provides the relevant standards with respect to when it's appropriate to recuse oneself in a quasi-judicial proceeding.
Okay, I will respect.
And the way it was phrased, we presented it, I did not necessarily intend to present it if we did not need to. And if you recall at the last hearing, it was asked if we were going to request or I suppose modify this memorandum of law into a specific motion, which at the hearing officer's direction, we did so.
On the first page of the memorandum, it says, quote, because it has come to the attention of Mountain Trail that certain supervisors, plural, may have made publicly biased statements in opposition to its pending conditional use application. Plural, supervisors. Second page, during the pendency of the application, Mountain Trail has been made aware that certain township supervisors have made public statements in opposition to Mountain Trail's application in the solar facility. It then cites Exhibit A, and Exhibit A is the postcard that you've already discussed. My concern is that the memorandum of law taints the Board of Supervisors by implying more than one supervisor may have exhibited bias. And I think it's rather sloppy for this memorandum to accuse multiple supervisors of having an issue. With that being said, the standard of law, and I will note there is the Pennsylvania legislature in the second-class township code in 2002 recognized that people running for office take positions on issues. The citizens of Windsor Township voted and elected Mr. Davis a supervisor. It says a member of the board shall not be disqualified from voting on any issue before the board solely because the member previously expressed an opinion on the issue in either official or unofficial capacity. It's up to Mr. Davis himself to determine, can he be fair and impartial in listening to the testimony, reviewing the evidence, working with the board solicitor, and coming to a decision on the application.
Thank you. I realize that I neglected to give an opportunity to our pro se participants. Ms. Can
I just respond quickly to that?
Go ahead.
So there is a distinction. Well, first of all, I mean, it's pretty clear what the argument is. We're not tainting the entire board. So that you are having trouble understanding that, I apologize, but I think the record's clear that we're not requesting the recusal of all the supervisors.
I take offense to the personal comment being made by counsel.
Okay. And then secondly,
The record is noted.
there is a distinction between what what Mr. Cluck was reading is a provision from the second-class township code, which is the enabling authority for this township. There is a distinction. As a supervisor, you have a legislative function where you adopt ordinances, you can amend ordinances. You know, as we understand, that process is going on. That's completely distinct from this capacity where you're acting as a judge. You're acting in a quasi-judicial capacity. Now, you can run on a platform. I'm going to change the legislation. I'm going to do this. And the law is clear that you are allowed to do that, and any kind of position that you take publicly does not prohibit you from adopting different legislation. That is different when you're acting in this capacity. It's just as a judge. It's the same standard. If there's any question of your bias, then it's appropriate to sit. And that's, I think we've talked this one.
Mr. Gallagher, from my recollection, every judge who ever runs for office says they're going to be tough on crime. Would you agree with that?
I'm not going to speak to that. I would imagine, yeah, sure, being
Sure.
tough on crime is one thing, but this is not
Yeah,
that
well,
situation.
and those judges get elected and they sit in criminal court. Do you think that that's inappropriate?
That's immaterial.
Is it?
It is. To speak broadly of I'm running to be a judge and I don't like crime or bad things is, in a general sense, one thing. Actually participating in a project or having an attorney represent your family in opposition to something that you're considering, I believe is pretty clear that, again, not personal and whether there's actual bias, it's the appearance of potential bias.
Okay.
And that's been stated, so.
Okay. Ms. Polonic,
we have to make our record.
Ms. Polonic, are you here this evening? You're in a different spot. I think you're trying to confuse me. So I want to give you the opportunity if you have any questions for Mr. Davis, or if you have any argument on this issue.
I have some argument, yes.
Okay.
When we elect our officials, we don't necessarily always agree with everything they stand for, everything they might futurely stand for. We elect them because we think they are going to do the job we have elected them to do. And I think the question of making him recuse himself is ridiculous. How can we know whether he's impartial or impartial? How can we know he is impartial? How can we know he is impartial? How can we know you are impartial? We don't. All right? We trust our elected officials to do the job we elected them for. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Mr. Hartman, you're in Ms. Polonic's seat this evening.
I do have a comment. I'm a little confused because these hearings drag out for so long. Of course people are going to be reelected. And I'm going to use Maxitomy Township as an example. They've been fighting the way out of this for how long? And as it's going on over 3 years, so now 2 of the supervisors that are sitting there this very moment were put in after this started, and they already opposed it. I don't see where you have it. I'll give you another example. Up at Jim Thorpe, they had the same thing going on with these wind turbines. And that went on for 3-4 years, and they had new members come in there. You're going to have this because you drag your darn hearings out so long. If you would just have it that it gets solved like in 1 month, I could see that. But no, if you're going to drag it out over 3, 4, 5 years, which you are experts at, then that's what happens. That is terrible. What would happen now if you drag this out another 40 years? Then you have no supervisors that can go for. Because then you're going to say they're the influence. No, this is a terrible argument. Terrible.
Thank you, Mr. Hartman. Mr. Hoffner. I don't see Mr. Hoffner this evening. Mrs. Stabile. Not here. Mr. and Mrs. Yob, also not present. Mr. Ossenbach, not present. Okay. Mr. and Mrs. Balthaser. For the record, Mr. and Mrs. Balthaser are appearing this evening via Zoom.
The only comment I have is Gary was elected to do this job, and he should remain and do this job.
Thank you, Mr. Balthaser. Mrs. Balthaser.
Yes, I mean, I would just state that as a judge sits and listens to a jury and all the information that is presented, I mean, they remain unbiased. And as long as Jerry can be unbiased and listen to the facts and make a decision accordingly, I think he should stay.
Thank you. Mr. Gallagher, do you have any follow-up remarks?
No, I mean, we would like to get this done in a month too. I mean, that's a little bit out of our control, but that's it.
Mr. Cluck? The board will now go into executive session. If you want to make a motion.
Make a motion, we go into executive session.
Okay, we're going to go back on the record. I have had an opportunity to discuss the matter with Supervisor Davis. I will also note for the record that Mr. Gallagher has referenced litigation with regard to the initial variance. I will also note that appeal was filed almost 2 years ago. The township timely responded to that appeal by filing the record, and to date, the applicant has not filed a precipice requesting argument, which is the reason that litigation is, from at least a technical and theoretical perspective, still pending, but it is not active. After discussions with Supervisor Davis, he will not be recusing himself because, as he stated on the record, as well as to me in private, that he believes he can be fair and impartial. He understands his oath that he has taken as a supervisor, and he understands his obligation to listen to the evidence, to listen to the evidence, and to render an opinion that is consistent with the ordinances of the Township of Windsor, the laws of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the United States of America. At this point, we will move on to the next issue, which is pending, which is a motion to dismiss that was filed by Mr. Cluck. Mr. Cluck, you may proceed.
Just one. Thank you. I appreciate that. Just for the record, I would like to put the whole transcript in. Exhibit 46 were the zoning hearing board transcripts. I would just ask that the entire transcript from that zoning hearing be submitted as Exhibit 47.
Well, first, let's have it marked.
Just to the extent that this may become an issue on appeal.
Wait. She can't do two things at once. She's actually better at it than I am, but she still can't.
Again, so Exhibit 46, which is part of the record, were just transcript excerpts from that hearing, and I just asked to supplement it with a full transcript.
What can you please state for the record the relevance of the full transcript?
There are other questions that were asked, statements by the supervisor, and if this does become an issue, should this become an issue, hopefully it does not, but to the extent that it may, that there's a full record for a court to make a determination at a later date.
Is there an objection?
No, as long as it's put on your share file site in electronic format, then we can all access it.
And I should have that, so we should be able to do that in due course. Mrs. Polonic, do you have any objection? Mr. Hartman? Mr. and Mrs. Balthaser? You have we can't hear you just yet. All right, go ahead. Do you have any objection? Mr. Balthaser?
We didn't hear.
Wait.
I figured as much. Do you have any objection to the exhibit that's being proposed? I know you can't see it, but it is a transcript of the zoning hearing board proceeding.
No, I have no objections.
Okay, thank you. The exhibit will be admitted and made part of the record. Now we'll move forward with Mr. Cluck's argument on his motion to dismiss.
May it please the board. Is that working? A little closer. the law of conditional use is clear. It's black letter law. The applicant must persuade the local governing body, that's the Board of Supervisors, that the proposed use of this commercial solar facility complies with the requirements of the zoning ordinance for such conditional use at the time of submission. And that's what your zoning ordinance also states. Merely expressing an intention or promise to comply with all zoning requirements is insufficient to show entitlement to the conditional use. If an applicant were automatically entitled to conditional use approval based solely on a promise of future compliance, it would make the approval process meaningless. I direct your attention to the testimony of Mr. Hughes, in addition to the Kimley Horn January 12, 2024 letter responding to the comments from the township engineer on zoning. On page 2, comment 6a. The comment is the previously submitted plans did not propose any solar panels on the Frederick parcels identified as parcels 3 and 4 on sheet number C-000. However, the current plans now propose solar panels on these parcels. Since each parcel area is less than the minimum required 5 acres, and the proposed locations of the solar panels do not meet the setback requirements as applied to the individual parcel boundaries, parcels 3 and 4 will need to be combined with parcel 2 in order to comply with the minimum 5-acre lot area and minimum setback requirements in section 615(b) and 615(d), respectively. In response, Kimley Horn, on behalf of the applicant, or should I say applicants, comment acknowledged Mountain Trail Solar confirms that parcels 3 and 4 will be combined with parcel 2. Mr. Hughes, in his testimony on my cross-examination, admitted in the future they intend to combine the parcels. Future compliance is not good enough for conditional use. I will note there is no legal argument from opposing counsel. They had an opportunity to submit a legal memorandum to the board. They chose not to. They have no legal opposition on the record to this motion to dismiss. Therefore, they have failed to meet their evidentiary burden to comply with the objective standards in the ordinance, and you must dismiss the application.
Mr. Cluck, even if the board were to agree with your conclusion, can you point me to a provision in the municipality's planning code that gives the board the authority to entertain a motion to dismiss at this juncture?
No, I don't think the MPC doesn't address this. It's case law.
Can you provide me with, do you have a case that...
The Thompson case that I cited in my motion. And there's a myriad of cases that address Aldridge addresses, Thompson, Aldridge, Joseph, all address future compliance is not good enough. No. And what I'm saying is they had the burden in their case in chief, and they didn't meet their burden.
I'm not asking you a substantive question. I'm asking you a procedural question. Does the MPC provide the board with the authority to dismiss a conditional use application prior to the objector's case?
I don't think the MPC speaks at all to motion practice.
I agree with you.
Right. And
I don't believe that it does.
I'm sorry, we're speaking over each other.
Go ahead.
I was going to say it's inherent in your authority to rule as a quasi-judicial body on motions. And this is a motion that says they didn't meet their evidentiary standard. Let's not waste time and money having us put a case on that's not necessary when they never met their burden.
Mr. Gallagher.
This motion was raised at the end, I can't remember the date, December 5th. It was the December hearing. And there was argument at that time, and I said that there was no need to write a brief because there was no merit to the motion to dismiss. And I just to restate those arguments again, there were the first grounds for appeal was that that Mountain Trail did not have standing, and that issue was addressed at that hearing, and the board made a decision at that time that Mountain Trail could amend the application to make Leeward an applicant as well, or a co-applicant, and the issue of standing was resolved then. The second argument that was made was a facial one, that there are 3 Frederick parcels and 2 of them do not comply with what is purported to be a 5-acre minimum requirement. And the zoning ordinance, and as I stated before, the zoning ordinance does not regulate lots as recorded on a subdivision plan. It can be the lot or lots, and if you just look at the definition provided for in section 201.8, the definition of lot says not necessarily a lot or lots shown on a duly recorded map. So under the terms of the zoning ordinance, a lot can be more than one lot. So there is no 5-acre minimum requirement just for one lot. There are numerous instances in the code where it talks about other properties, contiguous properties comprising the subject property, and of particular importance here, the definition of commercial solar energy system states it's an area of land or other area. So the use that we're applying under contemplates that it's going to be more than one lot, and it can be a number of additional lots. So for those reasons, we believe that the motion to dismiss should be denied.
Mrs. Polonic? No comment. Mr. Hartman? No comment. Someone want to turn the Hartmans on? I'm sorry, the Balthazars on?
No, we have no comment.
Thank you.
No comment.
The board has reviewed this matter. Do any members of the board believe that we need to go into another executive session to discuss this? Have you heard anything?
I haven't heard anything that would change my mind.
Okay. The board since as Mr. Clark has acknowledged, the municipality's planning code does not contemplate motion practice without even reaching the merits of the arguments raised by the objector. The board does not believe that it has the authority to entertain a motion to dismiss, and therefore the motion is denied. Mr. Clark, you may call your first witness.
Just want to state on the record, opposing counsel was supposed to have submitted his argument, so I had an opportunity to respond, and that did not occur. I will note for the record my objection to the ruling, and we'll see you on appeal.
I'm sure we will. Thank you, Mr. Clark. Are you ready to proceed with your case this evening?
Yes. They call Jeffrey Bryan. You have photographs of the record for time.
10 copies of each, and I label them location.
Right now, but we need to mark them in the exhibit and distribute them to the supervisors. Do we call those a package, and what do you call it?
Only one 500.
Okay, the first one. Do you want to talk about it and then? Speak close to the mic.
Well,
May I have the spelling of your first and last name, please?
first name is Jeffrey, Jeffry. Bryan, Bryan.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Mr. Bryan, I note for the record that you have come up to the witness podium with some documents. Are those exhibits or notes, or can you identify what they are?
I have photographs, 5 photographs, copies made, okay. And then I just have a copy of provisions from our ordinance that I received from Attorney Cluck via email.
Okay. What is your intention, Mr. Cluck, with these documents?
I'm going to do some opening questions to establish who he is, where he lives, and then we're going to introduce the photographs into evidence. There are many copies. We'll mark them and distribute them to opposing counsel and the board. But Mr. Bryan preferred to talk first.
Okay, I'd like to have them marked before you begin. I don't need you to. I just want to have them marked for the record.
5?
Yes.
Okay. So the court reporter, you want to put if there's 5 photographs, let's have 5 exhibits. Sticker on the back.
Did I put a sticker on the back?
No, that's where we're going to put the sticker on the back.
That's fine.
Okay.
But I need to keep 1 copy of each up here when I present because I have the information on it.
Okay. Well, you'll keep the one that's the actual exhibit.
We just need a copy to be marked so it's part of the record.
Okay.
And then the others you can keep.
Okay. So you need 1 copy as part of the record.
One copy of each photograph.
Okay.
And you don't need to show it to us at this point. I just want them marked.
Okay.
Yeah, she'll give you back the originals with the sticker.
Okay.
And then when you talk about it, we'll distribute the copies for everybody to mark themselves.
Okay.
You may proceed, Mr. Cluck.
Mr. Bryan, where do you reside?
130 Lyle Road.
And Blile is spelled?
Bleile. It's a Len Hartsville address.
Who else resides at that property?
My wife, Cindy Bryan. Cindy.
And do you own or rent the property?
Own.
How long have you owned the property?
We bought the property in December of 2009.
Do you know the current zoning of your property?
Residential.
The zoning?
The zoning? No.
Okay. What's across the street from your property?
Mr. Frederick's farm field.
Is it an active farm?
Yes.
And do you know what is farmed on that property?
I've seen soy. I've seen sorghum. I've seen hay. And I believe corn.
Are there any old growth trees on your property?
Check. Providence grounds.
Can you, Mr. Cluck, can you provide a proffer?
One of their witnesses testified about old growth trees. So I'm asking our residents if there are old growth trees on their property.
The objection is overruled.
Are there any trees on your property?
Yes.
How many trees are on your property?
I have, I believe it's 17 fruit trees which are all probably about 10 feet or lower. I keep them pruned low.
And how many acres do you have on your property?
1.
And do you know if any of those fruit trees are considered old growth?
There is 1 cherry tree. When I bought the house, there were no trees on the property except for this 1 cherry tree. That cherry tree is probably 30 feet tall. It's a sweet cherry tree. All of the other trees I put in after I bought the property. So the only tree that might be considered an old growth tree would be the 1 sweet cherry that was there when I bought the property. And that's on the south side of the house, adjacent to the Sunday farm.
The Frederick farm across the street, is it uphill from you or downhill from you? Or parallel?
For the most part, parallel. At the south end of the field, where the Bend and Blyle Road is, it would be downhill. If you go to the north end of the field, it would probably be slightly uphill.
What is the property to your left from your home?
To my left?
Yeah, okay.
Are you
if you're in the street and you're looking at your property, at your home on your property, who is to the left and who is to the right?
If I am out at street level looking at my house, at the front of my house, to the left of my property would be the Heckman property, Deb and Dean Heckman. To the right of my property would be the Sunday farm, which is farmed by the Crick family.
How about behind your property?
Behind my property would also be the Sunday farm, which is farmed by the Crick family.
The zoning ordinance talks about creating neighborhoods with direct visual access to open land. Do you have direct visual access to open land from your property?
Yes.
And could you describe that?
Well, we have full access, full visual access on the east side of our property, on the south side of our property, and on the north side of the property. On the east side of the property, it would be the Frederick farm, across from Blyle Road. I'm sorry, got that backwards. The south side would be the Frederick farm. The east side would be the Sunday farm, and we can see all the way up the hill onto the Gasperi property where solar panels would be placed under the proposal. And out behind our house to the north side would be the Sunday farm.
Tell me about your neighborhood. Does the neighborhood have a specific name or title?
Does not, no.
Do the neighbors gather socially?
We have gathered socially.
And could you describe your relationship with the neighborhood?
Well, obviously.
Objection on Baldwin's ground.
Yeah, I'm not sure where you're going with this, Mr. Clark.
The ordinance requires, hold on. The specific intent of the agricultural district, the specific purpose is to create neighborhoods with direct visual access to open land with a strong neighborhood identity. I'm establishing a strong neighborhood identity through my parties.
Okay, but you haven't established, to my knowledge, that this property is in the agricultural district. When your witness testified that he did not know what district he's in. Do you have something to refresh his recollection with regard to that question?
I would need to take a 2 or 3 minute break to go through the conditional use plans and look for the zoning map.
Mr. Gallagher, are you willing to stipulate that this property is located within the agricultural district? So why don't we take a 5-minute recess so that we can that you can confirm that, and or so we can proceed with after that issue has been resolved. We're off the record. Anyone who is a party, if you could also come forward, I want to talk about some dates for future hearings.
Second, 26th to 28th.
All good. 22, 26, 28 are all good.
Are those okay with you, Sean?
Yep, all good.
22nd, 26th, 28th.
5:30 or 6?
6. All right, we're going to go back on the record. Mr. Bryan, can you state the address of your property again?
My address is 130 Belial Road,
Okay.
Glen Hartsville.
The board is going to take judicial notice that that property is located within the agricultural district of the Township of Windsor. Mr. Cluck, you may continue with your questioning.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Anyway, Mr. Bryan, you brought some photographs with you today.
I did.
Would you care to, how do you want to go through this, one at a time?
We'll go through it one at a time.
Okay. The first one has been marked as?
Let me just see which order she put them in.
You have copies?
I have copies. I have 10 copies. Okay, so I guess it doesn't really matter the particular order. The first photograph I will share with you is a photograph that was taken on January 17th,
Jeff, hold on. Distribute the copies of the photograph before you testify.
Okay.
So the first thing is I'll distribute if you wish.
Sure.
And please also reference which exhibits you're talking about when you're talking about it for the record.
Okay. Exhibit 5, Objector 5.
Okay. Thank you.
I have the one that's marked.
You get the original, I get one. And I hadn't made enough copies. We have 3 more. Who in the audience would like to have a copy? And there's the other side. Your people want one?
Yeah, sure. Right here.
There you go. Showing you what's been marked as objectives exhibit number 5.
Objector 5, that is correct.
Could you identify what this document depicts?
This document was taken right outside the front of our house, off the front porch. It was taken on January 17th, 2018, 5:03 p.m. It is a winter sunset view from our front porch, which shows part of our front yard. You can see a little bit of Belial Road, and you can see the Frederick farm field across the street with a sunset off in the distance behind the tree line.
You said that's the Frederick property across the street?
Correct, Frederick property.
And are they proposing to put solar panels on that property?
They are.
And do you know the height of those solar panels?
I believe, if I recall, it was 20 feet, up to 20 feet. I don't recall the exact amount, or the exact number. No.
Would you consider this photograph exhibit number 5 to depict a scenic view from your point of view?
Absolutely.
And if the solar project is approved and the panels are installed, will you be able to have this view of a sunset in the future?
We will not.
Your next exhibit number 6. Showing you what we have marked as Exhibit 06, could you identify this document, please?
Yes, this is a photograph taken, again, from our front porch. Almost the exact same angle as the previous photograph, different time of the year, different year, October 26, 2023, 3:43 p.m. So it would be a fall view. What we would see if my wife and I were sitting out on our front porch, swing, enjoying nice afternoon, looking across our front yard into the Frederick farm across the street.
Above the Frederick farm, there, I see, I'm going to say they're lines. Do you know what those are?
Those are power lines and phone lines.
And they're off in the distance.
They're right over Blyle Road.
Okay.
Just utility lines.
In the foreground, this is your property, the green area?
It is.
And you can see just a hair of Blyle Road?
Just a hair of Blyle Road, correct.
Okay. Next photograph. Exhibit 7. Showing you objectors exhibit number 7. Could you identify this document, please?
Yeah, this is a photograph taken, again, off of our front porch. My wife and I have a swing out in the front porch where we frequently sit most times of the year, except middle of the winter. But this was a photograph taken on January 8th of 2020, facing the east side of our house. This is a winter sunrise view, again, taken from our front porch. And if you look in the foreground, you will see the closest property would be the Sunday farm. And then there is a road at the bottom. I cannot remember what road that is. Is it Sunday Road? Sunday Road, and then on the other side of Sunday Road, there's a tree line, and up right below where you see the sunset is a field where the proposed solar project, I used to call it a solar farm, solar project, solar panels will go up onto the entire side of that hill.
Do you know whether the tree line is going to be cut or remain?
I do not know if that tree line will be cut or remain, but I can assure you that that tree line, as you can clearly see depicted in the photograph, will not, and those trees are tall and full-grown trees, and they will not block the view of the solar panels from our property.
On the foreground in front of the tree line, is that your property or the neighbor's?
That is not my property. That would be the Sunday farm.
And is that proposed for solar panels, or is that just an easement, if you know?
I believe the Sunday farm is in farmland preservation.
Okay. On the other side of the tree line, do you know if that's going to be proposed solar panels?
Up on the side of the hill, yes.
Okay.
The open land above the tree line would be solar panels.
And if the panels were approved and installed, will you have this view of this sunrise?
Not like that. We would see the sun. We would see a lot of glare coming in off of it. We wouldn't see the picturesque scene that we see depicted in that picture.
Mr. Gallagher, you have an objection?
Speculation. No expertise in this area.
So I need expertise to tell you.
Wait, hold on.
Number of objections.
Well, any response?
I'm sorry, what were the objections? He's not an expert? He doesn't need to be an expert.
Speculation, irrelevant.
Overruled.
Next. 8. You sure this is 8?
That's 8.
This one's 08. Mr. Bryan, showing you what's been marked as Objector's Exhibit number 8. Could you identify this document, please?
Yeah, this picture was taken the same date as the previous photograph, October 26, 2023, 3:42 p.m. Actually, no, I'm sorry, it's a different date, obviously. We had 2 pictures taken at that date. This is the same view, or a very similar view to the previous photograph I shared with you, different time of the year, October 26, 2023, 3:42 p.m. It's a fall view from the east side of our house, from the front porch, depicting our view that we would typically see during that time of the year.
Okay, just to clarify for the record, Exhibit 7 and Exhibit 8 are the same east view, correct?
Same east view, slightly different angle, obviously. I couldn't find 2 that were identical as far as the angle, but yeah, that's the east view from our front porch.
At different times of the year?
At different times of the year.
Okay, so in Exhibit 8, that's what the tree line looks like in the fall?
Correct.
Okay. Anything else you want to point out about Exhibit number 8?
Only that, this beautiful view that we have from our home, when we bought that home in 2009, one of the things that attracted us to that property and would obviously attract future potential homeowners to our property, should we choose to sell, would be that view surrounding 3/4 of our home, to the east, to the north, to the south, all of which, well, 2 of which, the east and the south, which would be destroyed with the installation of the monstrosity that's being proposed, solar farm.
You have one more?
I have one more.
Before we get to Exhibit 9, you've started to talk about, you've shown photographs of the view from your property, and you said in 3 different directions?
2 different directions. I had photographs, showing the east view and the south view, which would be the 2 views that would be destroyed by this proposed project.
So on 2 sides of your property, if the project is approved, your view will be solar panels?
That is correct.
Okay. Do you believe the installation of the commercial solar farm will adversely impact your property value?
Absolutely.
How close is your property to the solar panels, and both directions?
Across the street on the Blyle Road side, which would be the south, it's immediately across the street from our property. And I don't know what the buffer zone is. I don't recall that. But it's literally right, the property directly across the street.
Less than 100 yards?
It would be less than 100 yards.
And on the other direction?
The other direction, I don't know how far that would be. I would say anywhere from several hundred yards to a quarter mile. I don't know the exact distance.
Okay. All right, showing you what we marked as objectors exhibit number 9. Could you identify this, please?
That is a picture of snow geese, which that was taken March 4th, 2017, 11:08 a.m., which I believe was on a Saturday morning. Late winter, early spring. We frequently have migratory snow geese on property, all of the property around Blyle Road, all of the farm fields around Blyle Road.
Those are snow geese on the bottom of the photograph?
Those are snow geese on the bottom of the photograph, and those are snow geese up in the air.
Okay. What is the hillside?
It is property that we can see from our backyard. I don't know specifically what property that is. I was looking for a photograph just to depict the show. This is what we see. So I don't know as far as the migratory snow geese, but I couldn't tell you specifically who owns that property.
So one of the benefits of living where you live is you get to observe the migratory pattern of the birds.
Yes.
And you tell me about that.
Well, we frequently see red-tailed hawk species in our area, bald eagles. I'm not a bird.
Relevance.
Mr. Cluck, I think the board probably has gotten the point. So I'm going to sustain the objection at this point. Please move on.
Are you familiar with the Appalachian Trail?
I am.
Is the Katanning Ridge nearby?
We can see it.
Same objection.
I'm going to give you some latitude, Mr. Cluck, on this, but let's try to move this along.
We're going to tie this up with our next witness, who's the expert on migratory birds, which is relevant under the Environmental Rights Amendment, that they are a historic resource, and they're highly relevant to this application and this proposed land use.
I agree that the birds are relevant, and so I'm going to allow you to proceed. I just don't want to get bogged down here.
Mr. Bryan, do you have anything else you want to add?
In regard to that picture?
Sure.
Well, like I started to say before, we can see the Appalachian Mountains out to the north side of our house. We have a beautiful view of that, which fortunately, because the Sunday Farm is in farmland preservation, we're not in any danger of losing that. But clearly, we're in very close proximity to the Kittatinny Ridge, and I am not, make it very clear, I'm not an expert on bird migration, but I will say we have a very large variety of not only birds, but other wildlife in our surrounding area. It's routine. We would see fox, like I said, white-tailed deer, frequently, multiple times per year.
And is that one of the reasons you've been living at this location since 2009?
It is. We love our property. We love the views that we have. We love the opportunity that we have to go out and sit on our perch in a nice evening and enjoy the beautiful views and the beautiful sunsets and watch the wildlife. In fact, a few weeks ago, I saw a fox running in the field across the street from us on the Frederick property. You don't see that everywhere. We're fortunate to live in an area where we have beautiful views of nature that will be destroyed with solar panels on two sides of our property.
Are there any other reasons you're opposed to the commercial solar farm project?
Property value. I know I, for one, if I was purchasing property, and I could speak for myself, and I would look at that house as it is now, I would be highly interested in buying that house. But if I went in there as a buyer and saw solar panels surrounding that property, I wouldn't want it. I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. And I can safely say that will impact my property value. I'm concerned about the glare, the potential glare that can come off these panels. I'm concerned about the ambient heat that could be radiated from such a large area of solar panels in close proximity to my land, to my property. I spent over $250,000 on my house and my land.
What was the question? I didn't ask you, I asked the court reporter.
Are there any other reasons you're opposed to the commercial solar farm project?
It is an open-ended question, but you didn't object when it was asked, so I'm going to allow him to proceed.
Thank you. My wife and I spent over $250,000 on that property 14 years ago. We looked at it not only as a place for us to live and enjoy, but also as an investment in our future. I'm 57 years old. I'm a few years away from retirement. I don't know what the future holds, but there's a high likelihood at some point I'd be interested in selling that property, and these solar panels are going to financially impact me to an unknown detrimental level, but nonetheless, they will have a negative impact. And anybody who says otherwise, I challenge them to dispute that. Because I would ask anybody in this room, if they were looking for a house, if they would go up and buy a home surrounded by this ugly monstrosity that's being proposed in our neighborhood. And that's all I have to say about it at this point.
So to summarize, you believe this will have an adverse impact on your family's use and enjoyment of your property?
100%.
I have no further questions.
Mr. Gallagher.
Sorry.
How you doing, Mr. Bryan?
Good.
I just have a few questions for you. Congratulations on your near retirement. Very jealous. May I ask, what is your profession, or what are you retiring from?
Well, I don't have a set retirement date at this point, but I teach for the Hamburg School District. I teach third grade over at Perry Elementary School.
Okay. And you said so you're not a certified appraiser?
No.
Okay. Do you have any experience in the real estate industry?
Yeah. I have purchased several properties and homes within my lifetime. I did take and pass a course in real estate about 25 years ago. I never worked as a realtor. I'm very familiar with real estate in that regard. And just as a property owner and a person who has purchased properties in the past, I can tell you, I know where you're headed with this, but that the solar panels will impact my property value.
Okay. And just to be clear. You said you moved in 2009. Did you review the Windsor Township zoning ordinance before you purchased your property?
I did. I was aware that the one thing I knew when I bought that property is that it was a primarily agricultural township, and I knew that the minimum lot size was 1 acre. I also knew that the property across the street, the Frederick Farm, as well as the property behind me and to the east was in the Clean and Green. I believe that's what it was called, program. I could be mistaken on the exact terminology with it. But specific zoning ordinances, I didn't pick up a zoning ordinance and read through it, but I was somewhat familiar with what the township I was moving into.
Okay, and do you understand that there are other uses permitted on this property besides a farm and a solar facility?
I don't know what those uses would be.
Are you aware that the maximum height in this zoning district is greater than 20 feet?
Again, I did not read the zoning ordinance.
Okay, so there are buildings that could be built as of right that are taller than 20 feet.
Right, that's not what I'm arguing about, though.
Well, you were concerned about the solar panels ruining your view from your porch, is what I understood your testimony to be.
It was one of the things I testified about.
But there are other uses that could impact that view greater than the proposed solar facility.
I assume there are other potential uses, but that's not what I'm arguing about at this point.
Well, communication towers, cell phone towers are permitted in this zoning district. Would that impact your view more than a solar panel?
No.
Would a 35-foot building impact your view?
Depends on the specific location of that 35-foot building. 35-foot building isn't covering that entire field like the solar panels would.
But it could, potentially.
Really? Can you explain?
Well, that's just legal argument, but there are other uses. My point is,
I would love to see a depiction of how that would work. I mean, I've lived there for 14 years, and the topography of that land would definitely not be such that you could put a building up that would cover that entire field.
Okay. Well, I have no further questions.
Okay. Mrs. Polonic, no questions. Mr. Hartman, no questions. Oh, you do have a question. I'm sorry, Mrs. Polonic.
This isn't a question for Jeff as much as for y'all. While we're on the subject of Snowies, we were wondering about the reports and the emails from Hawk Mountain that they were providing to you, as indicated they would be before the last hearing.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to put a pin in that for a moment because I want to make sure we finish this witness so we don't confuse the record. But I'm going to come back to you, Mr. and Mrs. Balthaser.
No questions.
No questions.
Thank you. Mr. Cluck, do you have any redirect? Okay. I'm going to come back to you now, Mrs. Polonic. I'm not 100% sure what emails you are referring to. I don't believe. I believe that what Ms. Polonic is. I think at one of the prior hearings we had talked about reports, and I don't recall seeing that report. And I'm certain that if we had it, it would have been placed on the shared drive, and you wouldn't be asking me whether we received it because you would have seen it. And you're nodding your head, and yes. Yeah. So, do you have an update on where that report is? So I'd like to see that disclosed before the next hearing.
Well, we're not. There's no rule for us to disclose something that's not required. And as I mentioned, if you choose to do so in a follow fashion after we observe it, that will go down to the hearing.
Okay.
I thought we voted.
I think the board has the authority to require you to produce, and the board has indicated that they'd like to see that. So I'd like to see that disclosed.
There's no rules. I mean, there's no duty for us to prepare or produce a report.
Let me ask you this question, Mr. Gallagher. If the board were to approve your application and make it a condition of the approval that you produce that report, you would produce that report, correct?
Very likely, yes.
Okay. At this stage, that might be the best I can do, because, as I stated earlier, the municipality's planning code does not give us, and that's the law that allows us that permits us to have these hearings, does not really give us all of the tools that we would have in a civil courtroom. So at this point, there is an argument that he doesn't have a duty to disclose it. However, the board does have the ability, when they render their final decision, to attach conditions.
The last hearing, he said he would produce it. He said, if I can clarify the record.
You may, Mr. Cluck.
Their witness testified there was no concern about the letter from the Hawk Mountain section. And I asked why, and he said because they have a consultant. The consultant's name is West, who has prepared a report. The board directed council to produce the report. The council objected and said it's in draft form. There was discussion back and forth about is anything privileged, what's it going to take to be final, and ultimately the board said produce it.
Yes.
Last hearing, council sent an email to the solicitor and said we're not producing the document. I'm about to present somebody from the Hawk Mountain Sanctuary. I don't think I want to present her unless I see this report. And I think I have a right to see that report. It was mentioned, it's talked about in the record, and it's not a question of a duty to produce.
It is. We're just making the same arguments over again. We have no duty to make his case. This is an irrelevant issue.
However, Mr. Cluck raises a point that I appreciate the recollection, because that proceeding was at the beginning of December. However, my recollection, and the chairman tapped me a moment ago and said we wanted to see that report. So thank you for having a better memory than I do, Mr. Mazeka. But I do think that report, we already ruled that it needed to be disclosed, and the board has indicated they want to see it. You've referenced it in testimony. So what would be the preference? If we don't see that report, then I can strike your expert's testimony from the record.
We didn't provide it. We didn't provide any testimony on that subject whatsoever, because we're not required to. And as I stated, and I don't have a transcript in front of me, but reiterating my point, this whole subject matter is relevant to whether or not we meet the standards under the zoning ordinance. We have presented testimony and evidence to the standards of the ordinance. This Hawk Mountain issue is irrelevant to this board's consideration whether or not we are a commercial solar energy system under the ordinance. These arguments about the environmental right amendment we do not agree with. He's making a legal argument. We're not going to be penalized for looking into an issue that we were not required to. And there's going to be testimony and evidence not understanding or appreciating what we're about to hear. We would rather be in a situation to take it all in, and if we deem it appropriate, respond accordingly. At this juncture, we don't believe that it's necessary to submit anything.
Do you agree that in the course of these proceedings that the chairman has the authority to enter a subpoena directing the production of documents?
Yeah, there is the subpoena power. Yes, there is the subpoena power. But it has to be watched, and if there are rules regarding the disclosure of drafts, I can't imagine any court saying that we're required to disclose the report that's not even required. So I don't want to make a legal argument. I think I've been pretty transparent on what we're going to do. No good deed goes unpunished, basically, what you're doing. So we would prefer that the objectors put on their case.
Mr. Cluck, did you have a response?
It goes to scenic views. That is a relevant component of this application. It's relevant under the zoning ordinance. This entire area is a scenic view. When you drive around this area, the first thing you say is, look at the scenic view of this place. Go up on Contanning Ridge. What is that? That's a national landmark, a historic landmark, with thousands of people coming to visit Windsor Township for the scenic view. Hog Mountain Sanctuary is nearby, and we have an expert in ornithology. On ornithology, that's going to talk about a bunch of these migratory birds. They're relevant to the scenic view. The impact of the solar facility on the migratory pattern of those birds and the impact on the economics of Windsor Township and Berks County is significant. If they have a person who's prepared a report and says, oh, we don't have any concerns, I think that's highly relevant.
This is the time for the objectors to put on their case. They're assuming facts are not even in records. So let them put on their case.
Mr. Cluck, if you feel strongly that this is a report that you need, please submit a request for a subpoena to the board. No, in writing, with a subpoena with a proposed subpoena identifying what you are seeking for the chairman to sign. A subpoena form. You have one. Of course he does. Oh.
I have some questions for Mr. Bryan.
You have, okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Bryan. Oh, good, you're still there. Mr. Mazeka has questions for you.
Okay, just for clarification, your house is located on Belial Road on the east end of Belial, from heading east from Monument Road?
Correct.
Would you say your house is, according to these pictures, would basically be the last house on the end of that row?
We're the last house in that row of homes. There are two more houses on Belial after the bend.
Around the bend, but they're down below you.
They're down
That's
below
why
us. We're the last house in that row of homes on Belial Road.
Okay. When your house was built, that house was built after the Heckman house?
I don't know. I know our house was built in 1990 or 91. I know that those lots were subdivided out of the Sunday property, the 1 acre lots. I believe it was 20 lots or somewhere around there. I don't know the order of when the homes were built.
Okay. Well, if I'm kind of familiar with the area, and I think your host, I know the Heckmans, and I'm pretty sure your house was built after. Do you think the people that built that house went to the Heckmans next door and asked them if they minded if their view was going to be obstructed with your house to the east?
I have no idea what discussions may have been had.
Do you feel that there should have been discussions? Because you're basically standing here testifying that by doing something on another property owner's property is going to obstruct all these views that you provided pictures for, but you're making it sound like these individuals don't have the right to do what they want to do on their land based on your emotions and your opinions about the views.
Based on my emotions, is that what you're saying? So we're going to compare the potential home, a potential new home being built, to a 440-acre solar farm?
Okay,
we're comparing apples and oranges.
Well, my question to you then, if Mr. Frederick would decide to put 1 acre lot homes on the other side of the road, do you feel you still have the same argument?
To the best of my knowledge, Mr. Frederick hasn't proposed that.
Not today.
When he proposes it, come back and ask me that.
Yeah, but do you
Up
feel...
to this point, it hasn't been proposed.
But do you feel as a property owner you have the right to limit his ability to do what he wants on his land?
If I live next door to a property owner, I live next door to Mr. Heckman. If Mr. Heckman decided tomorrow he was going to fill his yard up with 4 feet tall weeds and junk cars all over his property, I absolutely feel like I would have a right to that. Filling up, hold on, let me finish. Filling up 440 acres of land with solar farms or solar panels is a far cry from building a home.
Weeds is a zoning issue. That is something that the township would take care of.
Building a home, you asked me about building a home. You asked me if a property owner can do whatever he wants to do.
If it complies with zoning.
And that's what we're here for. We're going to find out if it complies.
But do you feel as a property owner that you have the right to speak against it?
I have a right to speak out against something that's going to impact my way of life and my financial situation and my well-being. I absolutely have that right.
Well, it's my understanding that Mr. Frederick had also has not sold off his development rights, which gives him the option to put homes in there if he chooses to. And I know there was, when Mr. Gaspari made that comparison at I believe it was the first meeting, there was a lot of objection to his proposal if he didn't have solar panels on his property. As a property owner, if it complies with zoning, that is our job to enforce zoning in the township.
Well, what's your question for me, Dave?
My question is, do you feel as a property owner in Windsor Township that you have the right to tell another property owner what he can and can't do on his property?
Depends what he's trying to do on his property. He's trying to put solar panels across his property. I absolutely have the right to.
If it complies with zoning, do you still feel you have that option?
I don't know if he's complying with zoning. We're here in a hearing to decide that.
That is what
we're in here. We're here to decide that, and you're bringing up issues that are irrelevant. You're asking me about 35 years ago, if somebody put a house up, should that person have asked permission to put the house up? I wasn't there 35 years ago.
But would they have the right to come back and make the same argument that they put a house in their view?
Say that again?
Would they have the right to come back and say, well, why was this house put in my view?
Are we talking about putting houses in, or are we talking about solar panels, Dave?
Well,
you tell me. Because I'm not up here arguing about, hey, Dave, I'm not up here arguing about houses.
I understand.
I'm arguing about solar panels. I'm not arguing about a potential 1 acre lot with a home on it.
If it's an approved use in the ag district, we have to give it a lot of consideration. That's my point.
Any other members of the board have questions for Mr. Bryan? Okay, no other questions. Any redirect, Mr. Cluck? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bryan.
Thank you.
Mr. Cluck, it is 8:18. Should we start with your next witness?
Call Lori Goodrich, PhD.
Yes. Yes.
expectancy to be 10.
It's marked. Well, we just got. They will get up there. Bill, can you email me copies of all, including the pictures, just so I can get them up on the drive tomorrow?
Yes, sent them to electronically, so therefore I have the ones. Yes. I don't like. Do you want the photographs also?
I do. Lori J. Goodrich.
Should I call you Dr. Goodrich?
You can call me Lori.
Lori, I've been handing out as a your CV. Can you describe to the board this first your present occupation?
Currently, I'm working at Hawk Mountain Sanctuary as the Sarkisicopian Director of Conservation Science. The Director of Conservation Science. Yes.
And what are the skills necessary for a conservation scientist?
Well, for the Director of Conservation Science, you need a PhD in ecology or ornithology, and lots of experience conducting research on birds, working with people, conducting education, those kinds of things.
How long have you worked at Hawk Mountain Sanctuary?
To do the math, over almost 40 years, over 40 years.
Looking at your CV, under your work history, it says you're the Sarkisicopian. That's what I heard that. What is a Sarkisicopian?
Yeah, that actually is the name. Sarkisicopian is the name of the person that donated the money for our science center. So he also endowed this position, which provides for a salary whoever's there, whether it's me or somebody else.
And what are your responsibilities in that position?
So I oversee all the science staff at Hawk Mountain Sanctuary, which we have 6 now, full-time people. And we also bring in interns, or we call them trainees, from all over the world to come and study with us on migration and raptors. So I oversee all those people, but I also collaborate with our education team to provide college classes and adult workshops on different ecology topics.
And tell me a little bit about your education.
So I have a master's degree from Rutgers University from before I started working at Hawk Mountain, but then I went back to school and got my PhD, which I got in 2010 from Penn State University.
And your PhD is in?
PhD is in ecology, but I did my research on migrating raptors and how they use habitat along the Kittatinny Ridge.
Did you get an award for your thesis?
I got an award from the department. I guess it was for my overall performance in the ecology program.
Have you received any professional awards?
I have received a number of professional awards from both state organizations and or other organizations outside of the state, mostly related to migratory birds and conservation.
And directing the board to your peer-reviewed scientific publications on pages 5, 6 and 7 of this evening. You are one of the authors of all of these reports and studies?
Yes, and there's some missing from here. This has not been updated for a couple years, but yes.
Would you consider yourself an expert in the migratory patterns of raptors and other birds?
Yes, I do. At least in North America.
Sorry?
In North America.
What is ornithology?
Ornithology is the study of birds, basically.
I move to admit Dr. Goodrich as an expert in ornithology, in particular the migratory patterns of raptors and other birds in this particular area.
Mr. Gallagher, do you have any questions?
Or proof, I guess, just to close, get this on the record, I still don't understand the relevance of the testimony.
Mr. Clark?
Really? Ms. Goodrich, did Hawk Mountain Sanctuary submit a letter of opposition to the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission on March 29, 2023?
Yes, we did.
And does it describe your opposition to the commercial solar project?
Yes, it does.
Do you understand that the applicant does not believe there's any concerns from the Hawk Mountain Sanctuary?
I heard that. I'm surprised, but yes, I heard that tonight.
Anybody from the West Company contact you about Hawk Mountain Sanctuary's concern with the March 29 letter?
No, we not that I'm aware of. Nobody contacted me personally.
I think that what he's asking for is the connection between this testimony and the requirements for conditional use. I believe you said it before in another context. I think you just need to say it again.
Two aspects. The specific aspect of the intent of the agricultural district to preserve scenic views. But I believe that the solar panels, you will hear testimony of how that will impact migratory patterns. We've already heard about how it impacts scenic views. In particular, the Canyon Ridge and the Hawk Mountain Sanctuary are historic resources protected by our constitutional amendment, and that the local government has a duty to mitigate any potential harm to that natural and historic resource. And this is the most qualified witness in the world to testify about the impact of Windsor Township of this project.
I don't think her qualifications are in question, Mr. Cluck. I think that the applicant is raising the issue of how to connect this to the requirements under the conditional use ordinance. I believe that you have properly established that at this point, and the witness will be accepted as an expert in the area of, I'm going to say it wrong,
Ornithology.
Ornithology. And you may proceed.
In the course of the applicant's case in chief, one of their experts testified that they have intentionally planted pollinator habitat to attract birds and bees and butterflies to provide forage for those birds that are migrating.
I'm sorry. I just missed. Where are you reading from?
I'm reading from the transcript on page 181 of the notice of testimony.
Whose testimony?
I don't know. Look it up.
Mr. Cluck, you need to identify whose testimony.
Page 181 of the transcripts are numbered sequentially in order. You can look it up. I don't have the whole transcript. I have the excerpt, page 181. I don't know what else I can tell you. You want to take a break for 5 minutes? I'll look up the transcript.
I don't want to take a break for 5 minutes, but I'm also curious as to who's speaking. So if you need a minute to identify that, then I will give you a minute to do that.
Dr. Greg Barron-Gafford, PhD.
Thank you, Mr. Cluck.
My apologies. Sorry, Bruce. Lori, I'll read that again. Their expert, Greg Barron-Gafford, testified. So part of what has driven me and motivated me, this is the doctor, to come all the way to Pennsylvania tonight is to chip away at some of those stories that we hear. I'm not saying that birds never have problems around solar arrays, but as I mentioned before, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it again in a minute, we have intentionally even planted pollinator habitat to attract birds and bees and butterflies to provide forage for those birds that are migrating through by working with the Audubon Society. Do you have any reaction to his testimony?
Planting pollinator strips is definitely helpful for on a small scale for insects and for small birds on a local level. But the large scale change of the habitat from open field to 400 acres of solar farm really takes it away as a wildlife habitat for larger birds of any kind. So raptors, snow geese, anything that might want to use that field are not going to come down at all. So what he's really referring to is if we put a strip of flowers here, we're going to get butterflies and we're going to get some insects in there, and we'll get some small birds that can hop in there and take those insects, and that is definitely better than just asphalt or bare ground. But it doesn't negate what's been done by putting in 400 acres of solar panels, which is taking away a large-scale habitat. And some of the birds that would use that area on migration are, birds like the American kestrel or the northern harrier, snow geese that were mentioned, other waterfowl. They're not going to use that area. They're going to avoid it.
And what does that mean if those migratory birds, if they avoid that area?
Well, they'll either avoid it or, in terms of waterfowl, there is literature and studies out there that suggest that they actually get attracted to solar farms, viewing them as water bodies. So the reflected nature of solar panels just looks like reflecting on water. So there is documented studies that show that some water birds are attracted to these solar panels thinking they're water. They land and they get injured, and that's one of the mortality factors that happens at large-scale solar farms is water birds like grebes and loons, which are pretty rare, but they do fly over this area. We were very lucky to see lots of loons coming over the mountain in November every year, and then back again in the spring and April. So these are the kind of birds that would be duped by the solar panels that might end up getting injured or possibly dying if they hit the panels and nobody finds them. And the bigger raptors that we count at Hawk Mountain, I know northern harriers have been seen in these fields in the past. I don't know how long they stay. I'm not out there that much. But these are birds that are considered state-threatened species, and they use these grasslands all along this flyway, this Kittatinny Ridge flyway, as stopover habitat, so places to rest and feed. So it just means that 400 acres will no longer be used by those species.
And in your professional opinion, will the 449-acre solar farm have an adverse impact on the migratory pattern of those birds?
Well, I think it might have an adverse impact on some of the birds, so some of the populations coming through the area. I mean, farmland is one of the most declining habitat types or fields in Pennsylvania, is one of the most rapidly declining areas. So the more that we take away, we might say, okay, we're going to just use this 400 acres, but then you have to look at the whole landscape, and then are we taking 400 here and 400 there? And one of the benefits of zoning is that we've already set aside this area as agriculture, which benefits wildlife and people. And by changing that to some kind of commercial or industrial use just doesn't make sense to me personally and professionally, because Hawk Mountain's working in coalition with people all along the ridge, Audubon groups, Fort Indian Gap. There's all kinds of federal facilities along this ridge. We're trying to protect this major flyway for raptors. It's the second most important flyway in eastern North America for raptors and songbirds. So part of that plan, you can go on a website called kittatinnyridge.org. You'll see a plan is to try to promote, rural conservation and agricultural kinds of uses that would still allow for some habitat for wildlife.
What is an important bird area?
So an important bird area is a term that was designated at the global level, at the national level, and at the state level to designate areas within, let's say, the state of Pennsylvania that would be really special for birds for scientific reasons. Maybe it's because they have a breeding population of some rare species, or maybe it's, in this case, because it's a major migration flyway. And so the Kittatinny Ridge and Hawk Mountain were designated in 1999 as an important bird area in the state of Pennsylvania and nationally, and are recognized as such because of the migration.
Let's talk about the Kittatinny Ridge and the Appalachian Trail. What types of species are you aware of that migrate using this important ridge and the valley?
So we count all species that migrate along the mountain. I know we're known for the raptors, but we count everything. And we recorded over 100 species of birds, as large as tundra swans and all the way down to hummingbirds. Hummingbirds also migrate along the ridge. There's 16 species of raptors, hawks, that also use the ridge. There's some owls that are using it at night as well. So lots of birds are using this flyway.
Are you aware that the Hawk Mountain Sanctuary and the Kittatinny Ridge are significant economic factors in Windsor Township?
Well, there's significant economic impacts in the region, in the multiple township region, and there's been studies done at Hawk Mountain, which I don't have with me today, that suggest
this is outside the scope of her expertise.
Mr. Cluck, you have a response?
I think she's employed by Hawk Mountain Sanctuary, and I think she can testify about the impact of Hawk Mountain Sanctuary on the economy, because studies have been done.
Objections overruled.
So we employ 19 staff. We bring 70,000 visitors a year into the area, ecotourists. There's lots of bed and breakfasts and gas stations and restaurants that are benefiting from the people that are coming to Hawk Mountain. And that's not at all considering the people coming to the Appalachian Trail. But yeah, there have been historic economic studies. There's also one specifically for the Kittatinny Ridge called Return on the Environment that's posted on that website. I haven't looked at it recently myself, but yeah, it's pretty amazing, the economic impact of this natural area. And it ranges all the way from the watershed, that the water that is being is infiltrating into people's wells in Windsor Township and all along the ridge is coming off of that mountain. So there's a connection from the water all the way up to the wildlife.
And will a 449-acre solar farm adversely impact the tourists that come and visit this area to observe the migratory patterns of the birds?
Objection. Same objection.
Mr. Cluck, I have to agree that doesn't have the expertise to render an opinion. She can give a lay opinion, I suppose, but you've called her as an expert witness. So maybe rephrase your question.
The applicant's experts first testified they had no economic impact report. After their case in chief, they have produced an economic impact report, which is not part of the record. That report fails to recognize the tourism environmental impact on Hawk Mountain and Katanning Ridge, and I think this witness is qualified to give an opinion on the impact. You deal with those tourists on a day-to-day basis at Hawk Mountain Sanctuary. Are they still going to come here if this solar farm is there?
The same objection. She can't give an opinion.
Rules of evidence don't apply here.
Objection is overruled.
Well, honestly, I don't know, really. I mean, if they're going to come or not. I know, that some of the people are coming to the Pinnacle and to the Appalachian Trail at Hawk Mountain for the views. I mean, they're hiking. We get lots of hikers. They're not bird watchers necessarily. They're just coming for the vistas. So to the extent that vista from the Pinnacle or the other lookouts that would face this area would be impacted, it's possible, but I don't really know.
Does the change in the bird numbers and their migratory patterns demonstrate a change in biodiversity of certain species? Excuse me, not species, I meant areas.
Can you restate the question?
I could try. A reduction in the number of birds, a change in the migratory patterns, does that impact the biodiversity in certain areas, geographic areas?
Yeah, if it's, every little bit has an impact. Everything's connected. So if we're taking away habitat that might have been used by some species, and without doing research, we can't really say that. We haven't done research on this site, but I do know that there are bird records. Anybody can go and look. There's a website called ebird.org. So I know what kinds of birds have been seen on these properties, but yes, I mean, that's pretty much why Hawk Mountain had written that letter of objection, is that that we're concerned about the ability of the species that are flying down this ridge, or the birds flying down the ridge, to sustain their migration. Now, my PhD was done on two raptors, the Sharpshin hawk and the Cooper's hawk, looking at how much time they spend resting and feeding on migration, which is a pretty important question if you're trying to protect raptors. And we found that they do stop and rest and feed at least every other day, every second day, or every third day, for at least a day, maybe 2 days. So the birds using this ridge are not putting on a lot of fat, leaving Maine and coming down and ending up in Florida, not having to, that they wouldn't, it's not that they wouldn't care that it was paved over, it's that they probably won't survive if they don't have places to rest and feed. So our goal with the Kittatinny Ridge in Pennsylvania is try to protect as much rural habitat as possible along the ridge so that there is places in the future for all the birds.
11. I presume that it will be. Showing you what we've marked as objectors exhibit number 11. Do you recognize this document?
Yes.
Can you identify it for the record, please?
It's a letter that was sent from Hawk Mountain, signed by my boss, Sean Grace, in regard to the proposal for this solar array.
Did you assist in the preparation of this letter?
Yes.
Let's walk through this letter. It's dated March 29. This was sent to Windsor Township Supervisors, Planning Commission, and the Zoning Hearing Board. Is that correct?
Yes.
Why was this letter written?
We heard about the proposal and were concerned because of the large size of it. So that's why we wrote the letter.
Okay, let's establish the historic significance of Hawk Mountain Sanctuary. In the third paragraph, it says the Hawk Mountain Sanctuary is in Albany Township. How far away is the sanctuary itself from the proposed solar farm?
Oh boy.
It's not adjacent, is it?
It's not adjacent. It would be a couple miles.
Well, number one, it has not been proffered for admission, and number two, I believe your objection goes to weight, not admissibility. So it'll be to the extent that that Mr. Cluck will move for its admission, it will be conditionally admitted for that purpose.
It says Kittanning Ridge and Hawk Mountain are both designated global, national, and state important bird areas because of their importance to migratory birds, including raptors, songbirds, and waterfowl. Does this mean this is a historic resource?
I mean, yes, Hawk Mountain is additionally listed on the National Register of Historic Places because of our role in the history of conservation. Kittanning Ridge is an important bird area and was additionally listed, as mentioned in the next paragraph, as a Pennsylvania state conservation landscape. So there's quite a lot of attention from the state agencies and the Nature Conservancy currently to try to protect land along the ridge.
And the purpose is to conserve land and heighten public awareness of the importance of this rural landscape for people and wildlife, as well as for conserving Pennsylvania water, wildland recreation, and scenic values. Do you agree with that statement?
Yes.
Do you believe that, in your expert opinion, that a 449 solar farm solar project interferes or would adversely affect those values as we just described?
I do, in particular at this place, because it's one of the best large areas of farmland left in that region of northern Berks County.
And the next sentence talks about important migratory habitat for flying and rest. And is that resting birds or nesting birds?
Should be resting.
Okay. And feeding opportunities. The migration goes from Canada south to South America. Is that true?
For some species, yes. Like the broadwing hawk, which we study at Hawk Mountain.
And your PhD work and your professional expertise and your writings observe these migratory patterns and you report and study them?
Yes, we've done telemetry on a number of species, so we have a pretty good idea of how much time they're spending resting and feeding.
And the letter says, large-scale solar facilities deplete habitat for nesting and migrating birds and other wildlife. You agree with that statement?
Yes.
And you already talked about the association with direct mortality, the birds that perceive the solar arrays as ponds?
Ponds or lakes, yes.
Ponds or lakes.
They would try to land on them.
Given your testimony and the letter from Hawk Mountain Sanctuary of the adverse impact of this project on natural and historic resources, do you have any suggestions on how to mitigate those damages?
Well, I mean, I might, if I had, was brought onto the property, I would say a smaller array might be more compatible in this landscape. Wires are also a big threat, so reducing overhead wires, making them underground. There's a number of things that could be done to reduce impacts, but it's the size of 400. There's nothing that can be done to, when you take 400 acres and take it out of use by wildlife, but a smaller array might be more suitable.
After the March 29 letter was transmitted to the local government officials, did anybody from Mountain Trail Solar or Leeward Renewable Development reach out to Hawk Mountain Sanctuary to discuss their project?
No.
Would you have met with them if they bothered to speak with you?
Probably, yes.
I have no further questions on direct.
Thank you. Mr. Gallagher?
Good evening, Dr. Goodrich. How are you?
Hello.
I promise I don't have a ton of questions, but I do have a few. So what is your experience with assessing the environmental impacts of solar facilities on wildlife?
All I know is what I've read in the literature. I've done some literature searching, and read some of the studies.
Okay, but you haven't conducted any studies that specifically studied utility scale solar development in migratory birds?
Not myself, no.
Okay, and there was no study, what's been identified as Exhibit 11, there was no study that specifically studied this solar development?
No.
Okay. You had referenced in your earlier testimony that and you just stated as much, that you read some studies. There are documented studies about impacts on, I believe, water migratory birds. What studies were those? Can you identify?
I didn't bring the list here, but there was a summary of some of the studies conducted in Alberta, where they were trying to assess a solar facility there, and they summarized some of the literature. So we have some of those studies at Hawk Mountain, but I don't have them with me.
Okay, so as far as you're aware, there's a study that was done in Alberta.
It was a summary of many studies, and so I read that, but I also had one of our interns do a literature search so that we have those references, but I didn't bring them.
Okay. And just to be, you didn't prepare, you're not an economist, right?
No.
Okay, and you didn't conduct any economic studies yourself?
Not myself, no.
Okay. In your opinion, well, would you agree that this project that's proposed is not located in the Hawk Mountain's important bird area?
It's not in Hawk Mountain, but it's in the Kittatinny Ridge corridor.
But it's not in that important bird area?
It's in the important bird area as designated by the Kittatinny Ridge, not Hawk Mountain.
Okay. One of the opinions in Exhibit 11 was the effect that concentrating solar rays would have on migratory birds. Have you been present for any or in all of these hearings, or is this your first hearing? Okay. There was a testimony that this is a solar facility. Again, I see that this letter was dated March 29th. There was subsequent testimony before this board that this solar facility is not capable of producing concentrated solar rays. Does that change your analysis knowing that?
It would change what was said in this letter about incinerating birds. That would be more what you're talking about. But it doesn't change how water birds are going to respond to the reflective surface or the fact that we're just taking that open space away.
Okay. And would that be the same? So if there was a mobile home park instead of a solar facility that took away the same farmland, would you have the same concern?
If it was the same size, yes.
Or a residential development?
It would depend on how it was designed, but it wouldn't have the impacts on the water birds, which is what we talked about, the reflective surface, but as far as eating up habitat, yes.
Okay. I think those are all the questions I have. Thank you very much.
Mrs. Polani. No questions. Mr. Hartman. Well, we get the ball phasers. Mr. and Mrs. Balthaser, do you have any questions for this witness?
No. No, we have no question.
Thank you. Any members of the board have questions?
Thank you for appearing tonight. We appreciate your expertise. Are you familiar with the warehouses that were recently constructed in Perry Township off of Route 61?
Yes.
As an ornithologist, you say you're very familiar with the migratory patterns of birds in North America. Have any studies been done on how those warehouses have affected the migration patterns of any species that you follow?
I'm not aware of studies on that particular project on warehouse, but obviously they do take away some habitat for particularly water birds, probably that are moving down toward Lake Iolani off of the ridge, but I'm not aware of any studies.
Well, that used to be a golf course, and I used to walk through a lot of goose droppings down there. And my thoughts are, and correct me if I'm wrong, birds, I understand it's a stress to the animals and that stuff in the area, but would you say that birds pretty much adapt to the surroundings?
It depends on the bird and the surroundings. Geese are very adaptable, for sure, but there's, for example, I'll just give an example. The American kestrel, I'm not sure if you know what that is. It's a small falcon that nests in farmland, uses nest boxes. They're on the decline throughout eastern North America. We're trying to figure out why. But one of the theories is that it could be that the lack of habitat, and particularly east of us, where you get into coastal plain areas, that the decline in habitat available for them to stop and feed on their migration has gotten to the point where they can't get from point A to point B without having to land in a housing development or get on a highway, and they're just, so, I mean, nobody's studied that. It's very hard to study, but if you look at the change of landscape in northern Berks County, it's happening very rapidly. So, so I do have concerns about how, as we nibble away at different pieces, we have these warehouses, we have these housing developments, you know, where is the farmland, where is the open space?
Well, it's just been my observation that I know they do adapt, because I can see the warehouses from my house and I don't see any geese landing on the roofs. But I do, as Mr. Bryant had provided us with an exhibit of a picture of snow geese out his window, and for the first year I've had them in a field 400 feet from my house. So I do know that they find some place to rest and feed.
They will move. I mean, they have to move, so they have to find a place. The nesting birds, I'm not sure what happens there. I mean, that area of farmland that we're talking about has had some interesting birds that people have seen, as bird watchers have seen along the road, and some of them are fairly uncommon. But so what happens, I don't know.
Okay, that's all I have.
Thanks for coming tonight. I have a couple of questions. Maybe in some comments. These birds that you're talking about are migrating to Hawk Mountain back and forth. Are they half of them federally protected, or the birds that are migrating that you're referring to tonight, are they federally protected birds? Some of them are?
They all are.
They all are?
Yes.
So if I was to kill those birds, let's say with a shotgun, or trap them or something of that nature, am I at legal risk? Me personally?
Yeah, if somebody notices you doing that, yes.
Okay, so if I create some kind of device and trap them, okay, that's a federal violation.
Well, the Migratory Bird Treaty Act does protect all migratory birds from harassment, And killing, if they're not hunted species like the Canada geese, you could during hunting season.
Okay. So my question here is where it's relevant is if these birds are perceiving these solar arrays as lakes or ponds and are confused, they fly into them and they're killed. What happens then? Because it's actually somewhat of a man-made trap or...
Yeah. I mean, I think the state and U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Pennsylvania Game Commission, Fish and Wildlife are the ones that would take up that issue. They probably would meet with the business owner and try to figure out some kind of mitigation. But yeah, I mean, they could be fined, but most likely they're going to try to figure out how can we prevent this happening again. So a lot of those situations which are unintentional one might call that, so it wasn't the intention of the solar farm to kill these 100 loons or grebes or something, they probably would try to work something out.
Okay.
But there might be a fine of some kind.
Okay. But you see my relationship there, right? There's something has to be done to remedy that situation.
Well, if this is going to be built, I mean, it's possible to try to consult with some wildlife authorities to try to limit, as I mentioned, the wires are a big problem for a lot of flying birds. If you can make them bury the wires, those kinds of things. But the reflection is really difficult thing to deal with, and perhaps a scientist who studied it has a way of mitigating that. I'm not sure.
Okay. All right, that's all I had. Thank you.
Mr. Cluck, any redirect?
No, but I would like to move into evidence with regarding photographs.
Is there any objection? Any objection, Ms. Polonic? Okay. Those will be admitted into evidence and made part of the record. Any objection?
No objection to 10 and the objection as noted earlier to 11.
Okay. 10 will be admitted without objection. 11 will be admitted subject to the limitations previously stated. Then it goes to weight. It goes to weight versus credibility. They are admitted. Okay. Then, Dr. Goodrich, you may go back to your seat. I was going to say step down, but there's nothing to step down from. Step up. We are at 9:03 p.m. I think this is a good time to break for the evening. So we will adjourn until February 22nd at 6:00 p.m. In this room, the large group instruction room at the Hamburg Area High School. Thank you.